Hello again. Well, this video came about completely by accident. I wanted to go out for a walk on a lovely autumn day up to Clifton Downs to photograph some more oddities for my little series Oddities around Bristol. And quite by accident, I ended up going on this little walk to see the Stones. Now, I knew very little about this subject before. I've lived in this city for 60 years. I used to spend a lot of time on Clifton Downs, especially when I was unemployed. I'd take a book up there, sit in the sun, absolutely, because it's so lovely up there. And I had never given these things more than a cursory glance. So I thought, oh well, I'll find a little bit more out about them. Go on this little walk and introduce you to them, and maybe a little bit about their history as well. And you're just seeing my disclaimer, which I felt I ought to put up just in case anybody thinks I'm pretending to be a local historian. I'm certainly not, and some of the conclusions I reach are more to do with having being an artist, walking around looking at things, than anything remotely like a local historian. So now that's got out of the way, let's carry on with the walk. So here are the first two stones. This is a natural place to start. Top of White Ladies Road, looking west as if you're going to start walking across to the Avon Gorge viewing place. And as you can see, they're very small. They're almost buried in the grass. When I was a child, my parents kidded me that these stones were the gravestones of pets that people had buried on the downs sort of many years ago. Like the stupid child I was, I believed this little Lord Fauntleroy bullshit. And yeah, here's just a cartoon of what it could have been like. They're not, in fact, pet gravestones. And let's go on a little explore to find out what they really are. So they are, in fact, parish boundary stones called mere stones. This is one of those annoying English words that means three different things at least. Mere can mean little, as in a mere mouse. It can mean a body of water, as in Lake Windermere. And as here, it means a boundary stone. I don't know the etymology of it, and hopefully this might inspire you to do more digging into it if it interests you. So walking forward, the first thing you see is this very picturesque old toilet block, Victorian, probably Edwardian, and round the back, in a very smelly little area round the back, let's face it, people will carry on using the toilet block even when it's locked up at night, is this odd little statue, which was installed about 3 years ago now, meant to commemorate a woman who looked after the toilet block and acted as a sort of minister or nurse or counsellor to the many prostitutes who used to use the Downs. I say used to. Clifton Downs has always had a bit of a dodgy reputation for things like dogging and drug dealing. Thankfully, not so much of that going on these days, but certainly when I was growing up in the 70s, it was pretty notorious, and I don't think many women would have wanted to walk around on their own back in those days. So, odd little statue, quite creepy. Note the dark eyes on one of the figures, which seems to have some significance these days. I'll leave it up to you to consider that. And this is the biggest water fountain on the Downs. None of the elaborate fountains around Bristol are working anymore. They used to be plumbed into old streams, old springs. Such a shame, because some of them are very picturesque. And this is one of the most elaborate. As you can see, it's got these lovely heads of animals around the outside, which do remind you that the Downs was always used for grazing. For commoners, that is just ordinary people, not elites, could take their sheep and their cattle up to the Downs and graze them on the Downs. And I believe there's still a school that is still allowed to do that to this day. and every now and then they take a small flock of sheep up there. And we do have some goats on the downs, which we're going to come to later in the walk. Just looking back towards the water tower from the halfway point, one of the stones in the foreground, and I'll just show you a couple of stones where you can clearly see markings on them, CP and WP, that stand for Clifton Parish and Westbury Parish. So as you start walking across Ladies Mile, you'll come to a couple of these stones, quite a few yards apart, and then about a football field length further on, another couple the same. And I'm just showing you a map of what this looks like. It's a bit odd, isn't it, that they're in pairs all the way along, and yet 4 of them are spaced out like this. I think the likelihood is that they were all spaced out like this. Now, why would this be? Well, we talked at the beginning about this idea of beating the bounds, and it's crossed my mind that if you had hundreds of people trooping up here once a year to do this, the people grazing their animals on either side of the boundary lines might not be very happy. So that might be the reason for a large gap in between, so that you could have room in the middle for this ceremony once a year without sort of trampling people's grazing land. That's just my own theory from looking at this layout. If you step to the left a few yards, you'll find this. This is what I have termed the meeting tree. I don't know what other people call it. I first noticed this early in the pandemic when we were all being told, oh, you have to go exercise on your own. Children couldn't meet their school friends. People going out for walks, you had to stay 6 feet away from one another. All this nonsense, which some of us didn't obviously bother with. But however, this tree sort of came into its own then, and we noticed that there were lots of children hanging messages to their friends on the tree. Quite sad, really, when you think about it, how families were so restricted for really no reason. I mean, you can't be in a more healthy environment than up here on the downs in the fresh air, but there you go. Let's hope those days are behind us forever. So this meeting tree has evolved, and people have hung all kinds of things on it. It was sporting a load of Ukrainian flags not long ago. Now it seems to be all these very pretty knitted things in time for Christmas. I think this is really beautiful, actually, and let's just have a little look at it. Here we are at the last 2 stones on the walk, which are at the top of Goat Gully, or Goat Gulag, as I like to call it. They've got this that white stuff on them. I think it's just dead lichen of some description. And again, you can see CP quite clearly on one of them. What I like about these stones is that you can also, on the side of one of the stones, clearly see the broad arrow mark, which is the government property stamp. And the other thing I'll just mention, you might have noticed yourself in these carvings on the stone, that how easy they are to make with a standard chisel. So just by twisting the chisel, you'd get the broader stroke and the thinner stroke. You can easily look up the broad arrow. It was on everything, from being stamped on paper documents to ships and everything you can think of that was government property back in the day. And of course on convict clothes, a classic image of a convict shuffling around the exercise yard in the rain with his arrow costume, and that's the meaning of it, government property. So we're at the end of the walk. Let's have a quick look into Goat Gulag before going over to the Avon Gorge and having an ice cream and looking at the bridge. This is part of the conservation efforts in the Avon Gorge, or how to keep people occupied on the public purse. So about 5 years ago, something like that, they put in these goats. They had 6 white goats, which were neutered billy goats, to so say browse on the brambles and the like the tough plants, and so that the important plants could see the light of day. Now, how you actually train goats that are wild, in inverted commas, not to eat certain plants is a mystery to me. And I mean, goats, come on, goats will eat absolutely anything, but we have to take the scientist's word for it. So some of those goats died off. I think one was even killed by a dog, and they've supplemented this very unnatural little herd of goats with some little black and white ones. The goats are harmless. You can walk all the way through Goat Gully, but obviously the goats are more at risk from people and litter and dogs than we are from them. Yeah, this gate really does look like an entrance to a prison camp, doesn't it? You can tell what I think about this, but I'm sure it's one of the big attractions of the Downs, and people do to bring their children to look at the goats. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this little walk across the Downs. I hope it encouraged you to look at some of the little oddities that are hiding in the grass around your neighbourhood. And please don't take my word for it. These are my own conclusions and my own ideas. And I hope you'll do your own research and come back and see me again for my next little trip round some oddities of Bristol.